Based on some conversations I've had, I think that some people have a too black and white conception of forgiveness, which causes them unnecessary suffering. If we roughly summarize, I guess we could say on one hand, there is this martyr level of abnegation where people feel like they have to forgive absolutely everything as fast as possible, and if they fail to do so, it makes them a bad person. And on the other hand, on the other extreme, we'd have, a vindictive and stubborn stance of stewing in your bitterness and resentment. And I don't think that either of these options are very helpful, constructive, or healthy. So in this video, I'd like to suggest an alternative. So before we get started, just as a disclaimer slash preface, I just want to clarify that this is my personal way of thinking about forgiveness. It seems to have served me well so far, and so I'm presenting it in the hope that maybe some people can take some inspiration from it, but I'm not presenting it as the golden standard and saying you have to have the exact same one. If you struggle, if your relationship with forgiveness isn't very harmonious, maybe some of the ideas I'll share with you in this video can be of help to you. But I'm not giving you any orders or telling you how you should act. One last thing I'd like to make clear is that I personally have not been the victim of grievous harm or aggressions, and I don't have the arrogance of, preaching or telling people or victims that have been in the situation how they should react or act. I can't say that's above my pay grade. All right, with that said, let me present my conception of forgiveness. First, I want to clarify kind of my moral axioms or grounding. So my goal is to prevent and reduce harm, right? The thing is, we can only prevent and reduce harm that is about to happen, so in the present or in the future. Harm that has already happened is too late. Unfortunately, there's no take back. So what I focus on is present and future. Under this framework, forgiveness is good and healthy, but there are some important caveats or things to keep in mind. First off, forgiving is not cautioning or sanctioning. It's not saying that a bad thing is fine, it wasn't that bad or it's not that big a deal. That's not what forgiving is, at least not with my definition. Because my goal is to reduce suffering overall for every individual, I think that rehabilitation is good, right? If someone did some bad stuff in the past or hurt people in the past, but from now on they have grown and they won't hurt people anymore, then I think it's fine. They're not a problem anymore. If a lot of people who had harmful behavior stop and now start contributing and healing others, that's a good thing for everyone. So I think that in general, hate the sin, not the sinner, is a good rule of thumb. Through forgiveness, we're not trying to lessen the weight of the sin. We're just trying to give, a chance for ourselves to move on, and to the sinner, to grow and change and become better. And the sin remains as bad whether the sinner, so to speak, redeems themselves or not. In my opinion, though, the main benefit of forgiveness is for ourselves. It's a personal process of healing, of letting go of past resentment and hurt and moving on. So that's something that's been a big weight or a source of pain isn't having as much of a hold on us anymore. Now, this is true as long as this past hurt is not relevant to the present anymore, right? If there is a relapse or you're exposed to what hurt you previously again, well, then the situation isn't resolved, right? So there's no moving on or healing before you fixed what's going wrong. And again, right, we're not taking away whatever the badness or the amount of hurt we've experienced, we're just moving on to a new phase in our lives. That's the goal. On the flip side, when it comes to remorse and making amends, I tend to agree with both Megan from the Key and Peele sketch or Kratos from God of War, uh, namely, don't be sorry, be better. Uh, and this ties back to what I said about reducing harm. I don't really care if someone who hurt me is also hurting, or that the fact that they're hurting me is hurting them, right? If you're slapping me and slapping yourself at the same time, I don't really care that you're slapping yourself. I just rather you'd stop. So that for me, that's really what's important. Fix and change the behavior. Stop doing the hurtful thing, and we're cool. For at least that's my stance on it. Once the problem isn't a problem anymore, it's cool. Whatever. But really, fixing the behavior is more important than feeling bad about it. I'd much rather someone feels no regret but has stopped doing a problematic behavior than someone keeps doing it but feels really bad about it. Another important thing to take into account is that forgiveness is an organic process and it takes time. A big part of it is just emotional processing, right? So you can't really rush it. I don't think it's good to try to force yourself to, forgive someone if you're not feeling it, to try and skip steps. Doing so isn't constructive, it's just inauthentic. However, I'd say it's a good idea to try and go in generally in that direction, to try and move on, but don't force it to go faster than it needs to. On the other hand, try and avoid to hold on to resentment for no good reason. Because the thing is, resentment hurts yourself too, right? If you're always stirring into all your hurt and all your grievance and all your grievances, it's just making you more miserable than you need to be. You're just kind of repeating the cycle of hurt. And hopefully, the goal should be to move on and go to a new, better place, a better phase in your life. I think another misconception about forgiveness, this all or nothing aspect to it. It's like you completely forgive or you completely hate the person. I think it's fine to be butthurt about a past issue as long as it's not causing problems currently in your life. It's not making you miserable, but if you think back about something that happened, you're still a bit butthurt, you're still a bit miffed. I think that's okay. As long as it's not preventing you from living a healthy life or it's not getting in the way of a personal relationship, right? So if you're in a relationship with someone and they did something that you didn't like, and it's constantly coming back up in the relationship and it's kind of creating and it keeps creating conflict, well, that's not great. So either you need to fix the situation, to move on, or to stop the interaction, change something. But I think that, looking back on something that happened and being like, this was like, I'm not a big fan of what happened, I think that's fine. And I think that if your standard is that you should have, no butthurtness at all, even if it's very mild, maybe you're making it harder than you need to. So, I'd like to illustrate this theory with some personal examples. I'll start with an example in which I was the one that did a bad thing, and so in this we'll first cover forgiving ourselves. For the majority of my childhood, my friendships weren't great, and so in middle schools I had two friends with which I spent most of my time, but we were teenagers and we were kind it wasn't great, okay? I don't remember the specifics, but I was often hurt. I think it was kind of a habit to be jerks in between each other. And I participated in it sometimes, but I probably was the most sensitive to it between the three of us. Anyways, so I kind of built up some resentment and hurt over the years. But I never really said anything because I wasn't a very popular kid, and so I didn't have a lot of friends, and I didn't want to do anything that would endanger these connections. So I kind of just, kept it in and didn't say anything and just let the resentment build up. Not a great strategy, but I was still young and immature at that point, and I had a lot to learn. In any case, I had this, decent stockpile of resentment about those two pals, and I would sometimes fantasize. Well, and not just about them. Okay, at this time in my life, I had this fantasy of just, saying everything I disliked about someone or all the ways they had hurt me, and I was pissed at them. It wasn't just this person, I just sometimes I'd fantasize and I thought it'd be so cool to just, let all the hate flow, all the grievances, be like, you're a piece of shit. But as I said, I was a cowardly people pleaser, so I never actually did it. In high school, things changed as I found my first, real sustainable friendship, we'll say. And so I think it was after I'd had finished school. In any case, I didn't have a lot of interactions with these two old friends anymore. And so one day I came across one of them while I was with my friends. So I guess that I decided that since I had a numerical advantage on the one hand, and on the other, I would not have to interact with this person or need to interact with this person anymore as a survival mechanism to avoid, the shame of loneliness in school. I thought this would be a good opportunity to have my villain monologue and just, start trash talking them. I don't remember any specifics, but I just started saying a lot of bad things about all the ways, I was upset as this person and bad things I thought about them and blah, blah, blah. And I thought it'd be epic, that it'd be, super liberating, but it actually wasn't at all. I thought they would fight back, but they didn't. They were just looking at me with sad puppy eyes. There was my friend just standing next to me, and the more it didn't last very long, I think, because pretty quickly I started feeling bad about it. I was like, "Whoa, this doesn't feel good at all." Pretty quickly, what came to my mind was like it felt like I was kind of kicking someone on the ground who had no will to fight, and I was like, "What am I doing? This is weird." And yeah, I just realized that it was actually embarrassing. What I was doing was embarrassing and cowardly, and there was nothing constructive about it, frankly, because I wasn't really improving anything. I was just kind of having, a petty revenge. Now, on the plus side, this day I had a first-hand experience on learning the futility of revenge. Now, I mean, this was a pretty petty level of revenge, but still. Looking back, this is one of the main events in my catalog of moments in my life where I screwed up. I think I give it a specific weight because in this catalog of all the times I screwed up, I think a lot of there's a substantial amount where I wasn't intending to harm anyone. I was just being, a bumbling buffoon, and I hurt someone without even realizing that was happening. So I kind of give myself a little bit more leeway on these. But in this case, there was some level of cruelty to what I did. Like I was intending to hurt this person as payback. I mean, I wasn't trying to shatter this guy, but there was some level of cruelty in the action. Now, this was probably at least a decade ago, and I'd say I've forgiven myself. And what I mean by that is that I don't beat myself up over it, and I don't think, oh, I'm such a bad person, blah blah blah. But it doesn't mean that I think it was okay that I did this. I still think it was, pathetic, cowardly, unproductive, petty. I think it reflected poorly on my character. And I guess, like, I don't know about how I think my friend didn't, I think the friend with whom I was didn't really care that much that I had done this. But if someone were to do this nowadays, and I was witnessing it, I would think less of them. I'd be like, oh, that's a bit of a red flag. I think that causing harm, if it's not doing anything constructive, if it's not helping prevent further harm, or there's like a good reason behind it, is not morally justifiable. And so I don't think that what I did at that point was morally justifiable. I just think it was a bad thing to do. As it so happened, later on, I met this guy again, and we would see each other fairly frequently. And he actually, at that point, I already felt bad, so I apologized and was like, I really felt shitty about it. He seemed to not care at all. He forgave me super quickly. So I don't know if he was actually holding on to the resentment on his end too, or if he was just chill with it. But in any case, the fact that he forgave me doesn't change that it was kind of a dick move, and the fact that I have forgiven me and that it's not like I've moved on doesn't mean that what I did was fine. What I want to illustrate with this example is that you can forgive and be forgiven without the need to pretend that what happened was fine. You can be like, yeah, no, this wasn't good. I shouldn't have done this. But, I've moved on, I've grown, I'm not the same person. And I learned a valuable lesson from that experience. Now, on the flip side, I'd like to give two quick examples on when I was on the receiving end of bad stuff that I think I have forgiven, but kind of clarifying the way I relate to this forgiveness. The first example is that when I was in elementary school, so like from 6 to 10 or something, there were two girls that would mildly bully me. I mean, I'll say mildly because mostly what they did was just like run around me and during recess and slap me and some other mean things. But sometimes you hear people talk about bullying and it's like hardcore. In my experience, it was just embarrassing and annoying, but it wasn't. I wasn't emotionally crushed, right? In any case, like it's been ages, like I don't really care anymore. It's not like this big deal. Like I'm not obsessing over it, being like, I also don't wish any harm to those two girls. And if I were to meet them today, right, I wouldn't be filled with resentment. But if we were to have a conversation about it, talking about the specific point in time, I would say that as far as I'm concerned, because they were probably more complicated than the version I got. But as far as I'm concerned, when we were like 6 years old, when we were kids, they were little shitheads. I mean, like that's just you know a fact, so to speak, in my opinion. I'm not livid about it or anything. Even though I've moved on, I don't think it was okay. Like it was still annoying and mean. Another more recent example was my end of studies project. I did 5 years of study in programming. And as part of our education within that school, like a big component of getting our diploma was to do this big um, professional-like project in a team that lasted for, like 2 years and a half. There were 9 of us, and at the beginning we were all friends. But like often in those types of group projects, soon the drama started, and there was kind of a power struggle. It started very equalitarian. Everybody had the same level of importance in decision making. But as time went, the person that had suggested the idea for the project and had the important contacts for this project started sucking the power towards them. It went from a flat line to a pyramid pretty quickly. That created a lot of bad blood in between different people within this project. Another thing that was annoying was that I had been elected as the project manager, we'll say, especially on a technical side. But then this other person would change a lot of the decision and conception of the project based on conversation he would have with people that weren't within the group, and suddenly our specifications would not be the one we had, and so we never knew what to expect. And so not only did we feel kind of deceived, there was also a lot of uncertainty about the whole thing, because we didn't really know what decisions were being made and when and how. And so yeah, it created a lot of frustration and bad blood. At that point in time, most of the other people that were working on the project also harbored some resentment for the leadership, uh, but they wouldn't really communicate it. It would just be, there would be private dissent. I was one of the rare person that would, directly tell them the bad things I thought about their decisions and way of treating us. I was pretty rude to them a couple of times because, like, I saw they were being very disrespectful. I think subconsciously I was kind of trying to get them to empathize with me by lashing back and kind of, giving them some of their own medicine. Because technically there were two factions more than just like one individual. With hindsight, I've realized that the person I had the most gripes with wasn't really trying to be a pain in the ass. He just, some people just have a very hard time putting themselves into other people's head. So I actually think that he was pretty lenient and chill, but just like very self-centered, I guess. Like really hard. That person could just not see things from outside of his own perspective. He thought he was acting in a perfectly fine way. He seemed to never really understand why people were so upset with him, even when he did stuff that seems like, objectively pretty messed up. So in hindsight, I realized that basically lashing out against this guy was kind of pointless because he didn't get why I was upset, and given the way his mind worked, I mean, I might have been able to get through to him to an extent, but there wasn't much to be done, I think. So just like being mean to the guy didn't really achieve anything. So I thought that was unproductive suffering. So I wouldn't do this again. But I've also moved on since then. It's been years. And basically, in this situation, part of the reason I was able to move on in this situation and not harbor ill feelings was one, that I kind of understood what was going on, and that this person wasn't trying to be a massive nuisance, and they didn't really, like, in their perception, they were innocent. Now, I mean, obviously it gets murky. And the second most important factor was just that we could split. I didn't have to work with this guy anymore. I could just, like, and as long as he's not in my life, I don't have any problem with him. I'm chill. As long as, we don't have to interact, and I don't have to and I don't have to be subjected to the frustration of trying to communicate with this and collaborate with this person, I'm cool. So for me, in both of these cases, I've forgiven what has happened. I've moved on. I've let go. I'm not spending sleepless nights saying, like, with shaking my fist to the sky. I'm mostly chill with it. But it doesn't mean that, I'm fine with everything that happened, or that if it would start happening again, I'd be cool with it. Nor that I would downplay what happened or say, oh, it was fine. I don't think that forgiveness is incompatible with any of those things. To summarize my general point in this video, I'd like to use an analogy. I think you shouldn't think of forgiveness as a blank check. Instead, you should think of it as scar tissue. So first, let's explain what I mean by a blank check. I don't think that forgiveness is a blank check, nor is it a get out of jail free card. Forgiving isn't pretending that nothing happened, and if something happened, it wasn't that bad, and all is good. It's just moving on. So don't stop yourself from moving on simply because you're worried that forgiveness would mean that you're basically invalidating your past experience, that you would be downplaying what happened. I think that a sensible definition of forgiveness is fully acknowledging past pain and then letting go of it, not denying it. And so this brings us to this other analogy. I think that forgiveness is akin to scar tissue. You were wounded, like maybe you were cut across the arm. At that point in time, it hurt and it was bleeding. And with time, it healed, and now you've got a scar. Now, this scar doesn't hurt anymore, but it has left a mark, right? You can't undo the hurt. It did happen, and it wasn't a good thing, but it's not a source of pain anymore. It's not a recurrent source of rumination or anguish. This process of healing takes time. It's an organic process. It will take the time it needs. You can't just say, I've healed because I must when you're still bleeding all over the place. If someone pokes a big finger right in your scar tissue, you're not going to go completely ballistic, although you might firmly ask them to stop poking you. On the other hand, if someone stabs you right inside your scar tissue, well, now you've got a new wound again, and you might be bleeding, and now you have to go through the whole process of healing once again. Similarly, if someone says, "Oh, this cut was nothing," you're probably going to strongly disagree and say, "Whoa, wait a minute there." Just like in the song "Horses," you'll say, "Hold on, sir, I must disagree. I must say you're wrong." Forgiveness is not invalidation; on the contrary. I was inspired to do this video as I was working on a blog post that's called Apologize But Don't Ask for Forgiveness, which is on a related topic. If you would be interested in reading it, you can check the description. I hope that the way of relating to forgiveness that I presented in this video can be of help to you and might help get you unstuck from a false dilemma. Take what's helpful from it and leave out the rest. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.